This is in no way my attempt to justify my comic book obsession. And this story, I really, really like. Artwork, the storytelling. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pull List. My name is Travis. Let's talk about Star Trek and Doctor Who. Now, if you've seen the most recent episode of Doctor Who, you know that it begins with space, the final frontier. The Doctor is talking about the dangers of space, but that is a direct quote lifted from Star Trek. And that's not the first time that Star Trek has been referenced in Doctor Who. Remember when Rose would beg the Ninth Doctor to give her some Spock? And because of that, Jack assumed that the Doctor's name was Mr. Spock. In Fear Her, the 10th Doctor uses a Vulcan salute, and in closing time, Craig asks if the teleport is a beam me up teleport like in Star Trek. And there are many other Star Trek references in Doctor Who, but I think you get my point. So this begs the question, is Star Trek just a television show in Doctor Who, or are the universes somehow connected? And by now you're probably wondering why I'm talking about this in a pull list episode if we're talking about Star Trek and Doctor Who. That's because the answer is found, as it often is, in a comic book. This is Assimilation Squared. It's an 8-issue comic series from 2012. It's a Doctor Who and Star Trek The Next Generation crossover, and it's officially licensed by IDW. Now, Paramount doesn't actually consider anything else canon besides the live-action television series and the films. Nevertheless, this is a licensed comic, and it can technically be considered canon. The two villains in Assimilation Squared are the Borg and the Cybermen. The Cybermen from Doctor Who are a pseudo-species of augmented humanoids. They continuously attempt to upgrade and re-engineer organic humanoids into Cybermen. The Borg from Star Trek are a pseudo-species of cybernetic beings linked into a hive mind. Their ultimate goal is to achieve perfection through assimilating other races and technologies. That sounds pretty similar, doesn't it? I mean, the Cybermen had to have at least influenced the Borg a little bit. In the story, the Borg and the Cybermen form an alliance, and Starfleet responds to an attack by the Borg, only to find out that the Borg are not working alone. And then, after getting all wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, the TARDIS gang finds themselves on board the Enterprise. The Doctor is able to recognize Worf as a Klingon, but he realizes that his memories are being altered because before that moment, he had no idea what a Klingon was. But to answer the question that I posed earlier, are the universes of Doctor Who and Star Trek linked in some way? Going by Assimilation Squared, it can be deduced that Star Trek and Doctor Who both exist in parallel realities. They both exist, but they're not from the same universe. They shouldn't be interacting. But Assimilation Squared aside, if we're looking at other types of media with Doctor Who and Star Trek, I still believe that to be the case. There have been characters in Doctor Who have mentioned watching episodes of Star Trek. And there was a short story published in Doctor Who magazine which explained what the Doctor actually does with clothing from his previous incarnations. And in the illustration for the story, it depicts a Star Trek Next Generation Starfleet uniform in his wardrobe. And there have been a few times in Doctor Who where previously fictional people have actually appeared in stories. Sherlock Holmes is fictional, but he's appeared in several Doctor Who novels. And at the same time, we've had a few Doctor Who references in Star Trek. There's an episode of Next Gen where Riker asks for a sonic driver to open up a force field. The Star Trek novel My Enemy, My Ally has the crew of the Enterprise watching an episode of Doctor Who. And in the series Enterprise, there is a time travel pod which is bigger on the inside. Can they get any more obvious? In an interview in 2009, Russell T Davies actually said that he wanted to do a Doctor Who Star Trek crossover episode. But seeing how Enterprise went off the air in 2005, it wouldn't have been able to happen. But right there, the showrunner himself was giving the sort of okay to have a Doctor Who Star Trek crossover that he wanted to happen. It would have been completely canon. The showrunner wanted it to happen. As for Assimilation Squared, my opinions are pretty high. It's a really fun read, and you can definitely tell that each character's personality is shining through. Amy, Rory, Picard, Riker, the lines are perfect for their distinct personalities. Also, there's a surprise throwback that I'm not going to spoil, but it involves characters that I haven't mentioned in this video. And as of right now, Assimilation Squared is the single licensed crossover between Doctor Who and Star Trek to date. IDW was planning on a sequel to Assimilation Squared with Doctor Who and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but then they lost the licensing rights to Titan. In my own headcanon, Doctor Who and Star Trek are two continuities that exist in parallel universes, and if there was going to be a crossover that was going to happen, I would want it to be those two franchises. Plus, I feel like Star Trek and Doctor Who have more in common than Doctor Who and Sherlock, so Sorry. In the comments down below, let me know if you would love to see a Star Trek Doctor Who crossover live action or a continuation of this comic. Or do you think that they should never mix and that Doctor Who and Star Trek should always be their own separate franchises? Like I said, I think Assimilation 2 is a really fun read. The artwork is great. Oh, and speaking of artwork, this is a variant cover of issue number 1 done by my buddy Joe Caroni. Isn't that neat? TARDIS gang on the Enterprise? I'll leave Joe's info down below if you want to grab that image as a print. That's it for this episode of The Pull List. My name is Travis. Thank you for fueling my comic book obsession, and you will see me tomorrow.